Folks who join us, and when you join us, just let us know where you're calling from. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling in. Welcome to October's webcast, World Federation of Youth Clubs webcast. We did not have a webcast in September due to Promise Awards, so we're back at it, and we're excited to have this conversation on how to motivate and retain employees. Right? Any organization is simply a collection of its people and its processes. So it is vital that you motivate and retain your talent, right? And we're going to hear ways in which that can be done. So again, welcome, and as always, just tell us where you're calling in from, and type that into the chat. Okay. So the agenda is pretty much the standard agenda. We're going to go through some housekeeping items, just as a refresher, sort of who we are, some of the key resources that we provide at the World Federation, just as another reminder. And then we'll get into the opening remarks and then the presentation and conversation, always leaving time for some back and forth. Think of this webcast, or any webcast, as a conversation, right? This is not a one-way dialogue, but this is an opportunity for you to ask questions and share and engage with our expert speaker, Sonya Llewellyn. So, or anyone, quite frankly, on the World Federation team. We're happy to respond to any questions that you may have. So there you have it. That's the agenda. Housekeeping, we are recording this session as always, okay? And a link will be emailed to you after the session today with a evaluation form, and then also where you could find this month's webcast on the website so that you can share it or refresh yourself with some of the information that was shared. We please encourage everyone to stay on mute until the Q&A section of the presentation. And again, if questions come up, use the chat. Dawn and I are constantly checking the chat feature and make sure we'll get to everyone's question. And just as a preference for me, I don't know how you guys prefer to view these sessions, but it's always great to be in the speaker view. It gives more emphasis on the speaker, but you can also see other people who are attending the session. And I encourage you, if you have video option, to turn your video on. We always love to see everyone's face during these meetings. So, my name is Mark Shamley. I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for the World Federation of Youth Clubs here in Orlando, Florida, supported by Dawn Nagy, who is our Director of Strategic Advancement and Marketing and Communications. And so our mission as an organization is to develop, enhance, and advance youth organizations all around the world. Our purpose is really to provide, like when we think about the world, we want a world where there's a safe place, a nurturing place for any young person to be able to go, to get access to a trained youth development professional to help guide them into sort of their journey in life and ensure that they're on a path to a positive, to be positive contributors in their community. And so that's kind of our mission and our purpose, why we exist. And the work we do ultimately is to support your organizations, investing in you as youth development professionals so that you can provide those positive and safe environments for young people. Our value proposition is focused on three pillars, if you will. One is guide and consult, which is really, quite frankly, the main pillar of the World Federation of Youth Clubs. We do that through the personal one-on-one consultation that you get from our mission advancement advisors. Those are folks like Tim Richardson, Glenn Permoy, and Jose Cruz. And then we provide assessments through the mapping assessments, that is the measurement and advancement planning process, MAP. Many of you are participating in MAP, and we thank you for taking the time and submitting your MAP and TAP information so that we get a better understanding of how your organizations currently operate, and then what steps need to be put in place to support your organizations. The two other areas around special programs and customized trainings, those are things that we develop in addition to those two main things around the one-on-one consultation and the assessments. In the middle is networking and learning. We are here to create an ecosystem, if you will, for affiliates and youth development professionals all around the world, all the way around the world, to engage and connect with each other, learn from each other. And we facilitate that through our annual conference. We also facilitate and leverage relationships with outside collaborators. We just added a new collaborator, Big Brothers and Big Sisters. They are a fantastic mentoring organization based here in the United States. So if you're looking for mentoring ideas and mentoring program concepts, this is a terrific resource for you. So it's these kinds of collaborations that we go out and build as part of our network to help you learn and gain the insights that you can be effective and successful in your role. Sister clubs, many of the affiliates out there, you guys are taking advantage of these sister club mentoring relationships between boys and girls clubs here in the United States and with your organizations. And of course, we have the webcast that we do on a monthly basis. The last area of our value proposition is promote and amplify. Thank you for participating in the Global Recognition Program Promise Awards. And this is, again, a program that really is designed to showcase your work, right? And the things that you're doing each and every day to support young people. And so we got fantastic stories and submissions, and we're going to continue to build on that program going forward. Remember, there are many grant opportunities connected to being a part of the World Federation membership. So if there are funding needs or things that you would like to be considered by the management team, think about mini grants as an opportunity to talk to Glenn, Jose, and Tim about. And then at the end of the day, we advocate and support the work that you're doing. Think of us as an extension of your own operations. But all of those being said, those three kind of tiers, if you will, they all sort of align with this one idea, this sort of what I call the foundation of our work. And that is we will remain a high touch organization, an organization where you guys can pick up the phone, send an email, and get someone to respond to you immediately, right? So that's sort of the key. So no matter how big we get and how many programs we launch and all these other initiatives that are really important, we want to be able to sort of be available for you and give you access to the knowledge you need to be successful as an organization. So that's our value proposition. This is just, again, the resources that you have available. I won't go through these. I just sort of kind of touched on them. But again, it gives you a sense of how the suite of resources are being built out in support of the organization. We started with simply the consultation and then moved to the annual conference. Now we have the Promise Awards, the monthly newsletter that just went out yesterday, which is a fantastic newsletter featuring Tim Richardson with a great piece on partnership. So I highly recommend that if you have a moment to take a look, take a read at that of the newsletter. So, all right, those are the resources. Those are the value proposition. That's my commercial time for today's webcast. Thank you for your patience. So with that, we're going to do a bit of a chat check-in. Okay, so what is your favorite thing to do on your birthday? I could start because my birthday was yesterday, okay? And the favorite thing I did was I spent time with my family. That is the favorite thing I like to do on my birthday. So, anyone? Dawn, what does it look like? Do we have a few folks that are coming in? Let's see here.
I mean, I didn't get an invitation.
Dinner with my family. Okay, gotcha.
I didn't get an invitation to Mark's, but dinner last night. I hear it was quite good. But yes, dinner with my family is one of my big things. Just being able to spend time with people that I love.
Sonya, think yes. Grandkids, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that. Yeah, eating crabs with my family. I like that, TJ. Very nice. So. Great. Well, we appreciate, guys, your participation and indulging us in this part of the webcast where we get to sort of hear from you in the chat. And remember,
and happy birthday.
Oh, well, thank you, Dawn. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. I have a lot of chips and salsa from one of my coworkers. I'm not going to name any names, but it was a month's supply of chips and salsa. So
There you go.
there you go. Thank you.
You're all set.
Right. Okay. All right. So we're going to get into today's keynote speaker. Can I call you, Sonya, keynote speaker? Just a subject matter expert. It seems so official, right? So
it does.
So it is, and we're so excited to have Sonya Llewellyn present on this topic of how to motivate and retain employees. I was thinking about my sort of setup remarks for this, and I found this interesting stat, Sonya, that said highly engaged employees are 38% more likely to have above average productivity, right? So 38% more likely to have above average productivity. Now, wouldn't we, as leaders of our organizations, right, want to have more productive employees, right? We are simply an organism that is built around people and getting things done. And we want those folks to be as productive as they possibly can. I think engagement really starts and ends with communication, right, within the employee. But I also think that communication leads to meaningful experiences for those employees, right? And that's really important as well. So I'm really excited about this conversation. I'm going to just do a quick introduction of Sonya, and then I'm going to turn the reins over to her. She's going to drive the slides. So we're going to have a bit of a quick transition. But Sonya Llewellyn is a 30-year veteran in human resources. As you can see, she's a director of program development for 501c services. This organization helps nonprofit organizations and NGOs on a range of employment topics. She has vast experience in this area, in the area of employment relations, in the area of policies, conflict resolution, documentation, all of those things. She develops and leads dozens of training sessions supporting nonprofit organizations, like over 3,000 nonprofit organizations around the country. So she really knows her stuff. She lives in Northern California, and we are absolutely thrilled, Sonya, to have you present today. So give me a second. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can share yours.
Great. Oops. All right. Here we go. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be with you today. Let's see. Can you see it yet?
Not yet. There we go. It's coming.
Yay.
All right.
All right. Thanks for bearing with me, and thank you for having me. Oh, so I'm just going to jump right in. Mark has some of my comments that I have. You're going to hear some repeated themes from me and repeated words. And I hope you'll understand that that means that I feel that there are certain things that are very important when it comes to employee and staff engagement. So we all know that for staff and volunteers to be engaged in their work, we have to remember that what is important for engagement in one country is likely to be slightly different in an organization located in another country. However, engagement is a universal and global issue. And we can't forget that we do need to consider our own cultures when developing and encouraging an engaged workforce. So we want all of our staff and volunteers to be truly engaged in their work and want to see their clubs succeed. We want and need staff and volunteers who care about the youth in their care and want to work towards exceeding his or her basic job duties. So, researching the global end of engagement, there are 4 universal drivers of engagement that are consistent among staff and volunteers all around the world. So the first one of those is the work itself, which should include opportunities for career development. The second one is a confidence and a trust in the leadership of the organization. The third one is that we all want to be recognized and rewarded for the work that we do. And really the great work, because we all receive a paycheck or kudos, for being there. I mean, so grateful for the volunteers. But we want to be recognized with that. And everybody has their own way of wanting to be recognized. Some people that's publicly, some people that's a very private thing. And number 4, have that organizational communication that is delivered timely and in an orderly way. So communication is key, and Mark talked about that just a moment ago. So we're going to jump into the meat and potatoes here and talk through some ideas on engagement in your own workplaces. And as we get started, I want to ask you a few questions for you to think about. You can share them, but you don't have to. As we start, I want to ask you these things. So number 1, do you have a lot of absenteeism or sickness amongst your staff and volunteer? The second is, do you have a lot of workplace accidents and injuries? And the third one is, do you have a lot of staff turnover or volunteers that are leaving? So if you respond, or in your head or either in the chat, with a yes to some or all of these questions, I also want you to think about what level of staff and volunteers is this happening? Is this in your administrative staff? Is this in your program staff and volunteers? Or is it happening at the executive leadership level? So I would love to see you guys respond if you're comfortable, and if not, that's just fine. So we'd like to see if you have absenteeism, workplace accidents and injuries, or high turnover. I can't see the chat box, so, and it's okay if people aren't feeling comfortable yet sharing. Hopefully, as we get into this, you'll feel like sharing, or at least talking about it within your leadership.
Sonia, we have, so far we just have that there's pretty stable in those areas, but I'll let you know if we hear more.
Great. And I'm so glad to hear that things are stable within some of the organizations. That's great. All right. So but the question comes back to, if your staff and volunteers are not engaged in their work, how can you all, as leaders within your programs and organizations, meet or attain your objectives that are critical to the success of the youth that you're serving? So then here's another question where I'd like you to play along. Engage with me. Who is responsible and accountable for engagement in our organizations? Who is responsible and accountable for engagement in our organizations?
A great question, Sonia, because I think that's something that,
right,
people aren't quite sure of. So far, we have an answer of probably everyone.
Exactly. There are people that think that it's HR's, human resources, responsibility for engagement, and other people think it's just the leadership. And you're right, it's everybody. We all are responsible for engagement within our own organizations. However, if the leaders aren't connected or concerned with engagement, it doesn't matter if what programs you put in place or how much you talk about it and discuss it. So it's got to work from the bottom up and the top down. So engagement matters.
Yeah, so real quick, we do have a comment that they do have some staff absenteeism, and then people being there but not really being productive.
Yeah. And so that's an indication. Those are good indications that there's some engagement issues. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. And thank you so much for sharing, for being vulnerable. All right. I do want to say that I don't have a magic wand for you today to make it all perfect. However, my goal for today is that you're going to walk away with one aha moment, or oh, that's interesting, or that people are going to share, and we all can be in this together to make engagement an important part of what we do every day, serving whomever it is that we serve. So it's also to spark further conversations within your organizations. And I think that's a lot of it, is just talking about it. So I'm also doing a big picture overview with some basic information to perhaps clarify certain aspects and to help get that conversation started. Maybe a refresher for some of you that already have a robust program in place. So let's have that conversation. And in light of the topic of engagement, I'm hoping that you all will engage with me and we can have that robust conversation. So know that what's shared here stays here. All right, so let me get to the next slide. Thank you for being patient. So here are the things that we're going to talk about today. Just quickly review this. What is engagement? Does it matter? What types of employees there are in terms of engagement? What are the barriers that we might have to a good engagement process? How do you know if your staff is engaged? Then after we talk about those things, now what? What do you do? Then in your appendix, there are some definitions of engagement. There are some additional engagement questions. The impact from Maslow's side, Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of the workplace, and then questions and answers. But I'm hoping that you're going to ask questions, comments, you're going to share your best practices with us all. So we don't have to wait until the end, but we will have a separate Q&A at the end. So, all right. So we already talked about some of the things that happen within our organizations, what you're seeing. But let's talk a little bit about, what engagement is and perhaps what it isn't. All right. So engagement, I'd like you all to play along. What are some words or phrases that you think of when you hear the term engagement or the word engagement? What is a word or a phrase that you associate with the word engagement? So if you can type your input into the chat box, that would be great. So I'll give you a couple to get you started. So it could be commitment. Or feeling valued.
We have present. We have present and available.
Yes.
Helpful.
Good.
Attentive. Part of a team.
Yes. Great. So what we're seeing is that engagement can mean different things to different people. And I love what you've said. So motivated to do more, that discretionary effort, going the extra mile, a heightened connection between our jobs and the people we serve and our organizations as a whole, and having that passion for work. So they all fit within what I believe engagement is. So that's great. So I also believe that there are 3 parts to engagement. I use a metaphor and it breaks engagement into 3 parts. So the head, the heart, and the hands. So in all of your interactions with your employees and your volunteers, you want to seek to help them be fully engaged. So let's start with the head, thinking hard about the job and how to do it better. So then you are mentally engaged in the work. The second is the heart, feeling positively about the work that you do. So you are emotionally engaged in the work. And then finally, the hands. So I'm engaged in actually physically doing the work. So I think it's helpful for me to think of it that way because I can picture the head, the heart, and the hands when it comes to engagement and other things. So we talked briefly a moment ago about engagement being a two-way street. Oh, I should have advanced my slides. I apologize for that. So engagement is a two-way street. We're all responsible for engagement within our organizations. So there's when you do the tango, it's really hard to tango by yourself. So think of engagement as dancing the tango. It takes two people, not that you would tango with more people. There's a phrase in America, it takes two to tango. So you've got, and in order for this to be a two-way street, you've got to ensure that your employees are aware of the whole business context and where all of us fit in within that whole organization. I need to be able to see that what I do every day matches up with the overall goal of the organization and our mission. I need to know that what I do is important to the success of the organization. So you've got to find a way to connect everybody's job and position, the role that they play within the organization, and how it connects to the success of the club. So I think that as employees, there are three critical pieces of information that as employees that we want to know. Who we are as an organization. What is the organization's goals and what are the strategies, and how does the organization operate? I also want to know why we exist. Your whole purpose is serving the youth of the world. And so having such a strong mission and vision is super important, and you've got a leg up that way. But they also need to know why it all matters. And then we want to know as staff, how what we do helps us to succeed. So it goes back to that line of sight, and having an understanding of how my job, your role, helps us all achieve our organization's missions. All right, so let's talk about now your best boss ever. So there's an American show called The Office, and it's based on the British version, which was first. This is the Ricky Gervais, the American version. And the character's name is Michael Scott. He is not your best boss ever. Hopefully not your best boss. He was not a very good boss. But I want you to think about your best boss. Whoops, I'm so sorry. And think about, they were probably very highly engaged with you and you with them. Your best boss ever listened to you and really cared about what you had to say. Your best boss ever helped you to find your own solutions to questions and that challenged you at the time. I had a boss who, when I was new in my profession, I would go to him and his response was always, I want you to come up with 3 options. And he didn't give me the answer. I was looking for the answer. That he asked questions and he engaged with me and helped me think through the situation to come up with 3 possible solutions. So that was a component of being a best boss, at least for me. Your best boss cared about you personally and helped you plot a course for your own career growth and development. Your best boss ever probably held you to a very high standard, and was fair and consistent. They times expected more from you than you expected from yourself or thought that you were capable of, so they challenged you. And then they gave you the tools and information you needed to be successful. So I want to ask you, what is the number one reason that employees leave their organizations? What is the number one reason that people quit their jobs? What is the number one reason?
Great question, Sonya. I did have a comment just to say that their best boss led from the back and shined a headlight on what the possibilities were, but never ran out ahead and forced me to chase her taillights. It's a great way to put it.
Oh, I love that. I want you to send that to me. I may use that if I may. That's great. I love that. Never made me chase her taillights. I love that. That's great. So does anybody want to guess what's the number one reason that people quit their jobs? Typically, it's their managers. And over 50%, I think it's 68% of people around the world believe that their managers, that their bosses, supervisors, set the tone and the culture of their organization. So supervisors have a lot of power over people's daily lives. So we want to be that one of those components or all those components. We want our staff to not be chasing our taillights. So people join organizations because they believe in the mission, but they leave often because they have bad bosses. So that's the number one reason people tend to leave their jobs. It's not money. All right, so let's talk about, does engagement matter? All right, so if it matters, and I think if you think about your best boss ever, and I should have said it might be one person, it could be components of many people. But I want to say that study after study, report after report, article after article says that engagement is very important within our organizations. So a poll from Gallup, which is an American organization, but they do worldwide surveys. They say, and Mark hinted at this, that less than a third of the American workforce is truly engaged. And there are many that are engaged. However, and I know that it fluctuates in some countries, but think about if 70%, so that means that perhaps 70% is not engaged in their work. And think about what we could all accomplish if the majority of our staff were truly engaged in the work that we do. We could accomplish a lot. So it definitely does. So let's talk about why it matters. It affects the quality of service. So when staff and volunteers are truly engaged, we see higher client satisfaction and loyalty. You know, maybe the youth across the world are able to reach their goals better when the staff that engage with them on a daily basis are truly engaged and vested in what happens and the service that they give. It also impacts cost. When we have engaged staff and volunteers, it impacts costs and finances. There's better productivity, performance improves, increased employee retention, there's a decrease then in workplace accidents and incidences, and more creative solutions to workplace issues. And when you have donors visiting, they see this when they visit. So when your staff are engaged and you have a potential donor who's coming to the club to see what's going on. It can have a big impact. And lastly, and I think very importantly, it drives results. So employees and volunteers take the initiative to do more. They take on responsibilities for their own performance. They hold their coworkers to a higher standard. Trust amongst staff and volunteers increases. And there's that willingness to go the extra mile and have, when people are engaged, there's a vested interest in their client or the youth here in their success. So to me, increasing engagement should be a strategic priority within all of our organizations. So let's talk about types of employees in terms of engagement. So there are 3 types of employees in terms of engagement: the engaged, the not engaged, and then the actively disengaged. So let's talk a little bit about the engaged employee first. So here again, I'd love you to engage with me and type into the chat box, what are words that you would use to describe an engaged employee? Now, we talked about what engagement might look like before, but these are things like they are rare and highly prized. They are, what does it mean to you? Words to describe an engaged employee. We talked about them going the extra mile.
So far we have curious.
Good.
And a good team player.
Great. Exactly. Those are all very true.
Oh,
they are
more votes for curious here.
Good. I love that.
And exceeding expectations.
Exceeding expectations, curious. They are loyal and productive. And I bet each of you, when we started to talk about the engaged employee, perhaps somebody or hopefully multiple people's faces or names flashed across your head through your mind. You know who they are in your organization. They work with passion and feel that profound connection with the youth that they're serving. They drive innovation and creativity, and they're curious. They have a desire to make things better and to know more. These employees move your organization forward in really working your mission. Engaged behaviors, they are optimistic, team-oriented, solution-oriented, proactive, and adaptive. They are selfless. They show a passion for learning, that curiosity, and they pass along credit. And when something doesn't go wrong and they're part of it, they accept the blame. And that's really important.
We've got some more here. Yeah, you're hitting it here. Pursues understanding of their role, takes lead on solving problems, curious about the work itself, passionate, not abrasive, more team players, goal-oriented, mission-driven. Some great answers here, Sonya.
Oh, they've got it. They've got it. Exactly. And those are the staff and volunteers that we want to work with every day, working with our youth. So thank you. So now we have to talk about the second type of employee, is the not engaged employee. These are your average performers and your greatest untapped potential. Not engaged workers can sometimes be hard to spot. They're not overly hostile or disruptive, and they likely do just enough to fulfill their basic job requirements. These may be your sleepwalkers. You're uninspired, and they lack motivation. They often don't know what is expected of them and don't ask for clarification. They may also feel that they don't have the resources they need to do their work again and effectively. And again, they don't ask for what they need. And these are your folks that tend to have higher absenteeism and workplace accidents. So make sure that all of your staff and volunteers receive coaching and training and ongoing education and opportunities. So now, the third is the scariest bunch. These are the actively disengaged employee, and they are quite easy to spot. You probably see their faces as well. And hopefully, maybe you didn't, maybe you don't have any of these in your organizations, and I hope that's true. So these employees are more or less out to damage the reputation of your organization and hinder the youth in your organization's progress and success. They are not only unhappy at work, they're often intent on working out their anger and unhappiness every day in our organizations. They tend to monopolize managers' time and sometimes drive away your clients, in your case, the youth. So these are your bad apples. So let's talk briefly. I want you to tell me about some traits of toxic employees or your actively disengaged employees. What would that look like? So one of the words that I have is pessimistic, negative. What are some other?
I've got complainer,
Yes.
avoids responsibility,
Yep.
focus on the negative.
Exactly. All true.
Discourager.
Yes, discourager. That's a big one. Self-centered. Perhaps they focus only on how much money they can make or are making.
Blaming others, uncooperative, abrasive. Wow, Sonya,
they know it. They know these people. And so that's what we want to get away from. So, and these are folks, remember, our engaged employees, they accepted credit, they took credit, but they also took the blame for things. These folks, they take the credit, but they always pass the blame to somebody else. It's always somebody else's fault. So we want to get rid of these toxic employees. We want to help them be successful somewhere else. All right, so let's talk though next about some barriers that we may have in our organizations to engagement or engaged employees. So before we get started, I want you all to think about barriers that you may have to an engaged workforce. And remember, what is said here is kept here. So it's a safe place to share. But what are some barriers? And it could be barriers that you had in another organization, another workplace. But what are some barriers that you may have to an engaged workforce? I'd love to hear from you.
do you have an example, Sonya?
Oh, sure. Well, what about leadership? That's the first one we're going to talk about. Because sometimes people don't believe in it. Could be communication. What are barriers? Communication style. People don't want to talk. There isn't trust.
We do have one of having fully remote staff across multiple time zones, creating communication challenges, right? So I think it's probably a common thing for people having to work during the pandemic, right? That
yes.
Other business demands.
Exactly. Those are definitely barriers to engagement. Thank you for sharing. It takes, I appreciate your vulnerability there. All right. So let's talk about some things that I have down for barriers for engagement. So leadership can be a big barrier. The leaders of all of our organizations have got to be committed to making their organization a great place to be and to work. Because if our leaders don't buy in or believe that it's important, and a large part of their job, there's going to be an overall lack of buy-in, of trust, of empathy, compassion, vulnerability, communication, and accountability. So thinking about that, are you holding your own managers responsible or accountable for engagement within their programs? Think back to your best boss. That's the kind of leader I want to be. And often, though, I think that there is a lack of understanding between staff and volunteer of what engagement is, as well as a lack of a shared definition. And we have to have a coherent story when we think about engagement in our workplaces. So what is engagement like in your own organization? What does it look like? Does it match your mission, vision, and goals? Does it match your culture? Why is it important? So as an organization, I think you should sit down and define it. Ask people, and that's an activity you could do it in all staff or within your leadership team. Talk about, let everybody write out what their definition is of engagement. And then what does it look like? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But what does it look like and what do you want it to be? And you have to make it realistic and attainable. All right, so the next barrier could be, well, we talked about that, the lack of understanding and a shared definition of what engagement means to each person, and then having a collective definition of what engagement means for your organization. The next area is focus and alignment. So has anybody struggled here on focusing in on what engagement is and then aligning those beliefs and those things with each other? Has anybody faced that?
We'll see what they say. I did want to make sure we knew it's about 10 minutes left in our session here. So please go ahead and put those answers in the chat.
Great.
I don't have any yet.
Okay. Well, so think about when we talk about focus and alignment, know what you want to measure and what do you want or need to improve. And does it fit within your own mission, values, and your organizational goals? Then the next area is measurement. So what tools would you use to measure engagement? Most people use questions. So craft your questions, and we'll talk about that quickly in a minute, to reflect your definition and your focus. And finally, communication. Communication, like leadership, can be a very big barrier to engagement. So think back to the beginning of our time together when I asked you about what level of employees tend to be the least engaged. So typically the answer is that frontline level, the people that are actively working on the front lines with the kids. And why is that? Why is it that our leadership level or management level is more engaged? And I think it's because of communication. We have access to more information. So you want to make sure that your frontline staff know what's going on and that there is back and forth communication with each other. And it's, I think it's truly about access to information. So how are you going to change the dynamic, that communication dynamic? These are questions for you. And how are you going to inform and keep all employees in the know? And it's really hard these days for a remote workforce to talk face-to-face. But this is a good second best. We do what we can in the times that we are in. And so having a Zoom call or a Teams call or however you would talk face-to-face, your staff want to see you. They want to engage with you, and you need to model communication. So get to know your staff and don't be afraid to meet with them. Okay, I'm aware of time. So here's an activity So perhaps take this back to your leadership team. At both the barriers exercise, what are the barriers that we may face? And then I have another activity for you to think about taking back. And that's defining what engagement looks like within your organization now. Then what would you like it to look like? And then to create some sort of engagement statement. And sometimes that engagement statement could be incorporated into your mission and value statement. And you may already have that. So to think about that going forward. So define what it looks like, what would you like it to look like, and then come up with some engagement statement. So for us, it would be 501c is committed to our staff and our community, and will do, what are we going to do with that? So something to think about, something to talk about within your organizations. All right. So how do you know if your staff is engaged? We've defined engagement, we know why it's important, we've discussed our barriers, and we've thought about drafting our own engagement statement. So how are you going to know if your staff is engaged? You need to ask them. You need to talk to them. You need to communicate with them. So I know I'm going a little faster here. I have a set of questions. There's 10 questions I have, and I've broken them up into 3 different areas. So this first set of questions are overall employee engagement. And I want to say that it's really important that you do not ask any of these questions if you are not going to act on the information that you get back. It's really important to don't ask if you're not going to do anything with it, because that would make things worse within your organization. So, all right. So the first ones are overall engagement questions. And those are, it's easy to become absorbed in my job. So these questions could be asked during, if you do appraisals, or times when you speak one-on-one with your staff. So and your volunteers. It's easy to become absorbed in my job. Their answer could be very interesting. Maybe they're not. And I've given you a little scoring. So you can choose how you'd like to score them. The second one is, I would recommend my organization as a great place to work. Well, what if they say they wouldn't? Well, that's a great place to start to find out why. And then the third one is, most days I look forward to coming to work. So it's very interesting what you might find out. All right, so the next one, so these are the overall or the essential questions. Then the next ones are what I call the magic questions, and that's because they stand for something. So the first one is under, sorry, I'm trying to buzz through these. M is meaning. So my job provides me with a sense of meaning and purpose. Now the second one has to do with autonomy. I have the freedom to choose how best to perform my job. Do they? 3 is growth. I feel challenged and stretched in my job in a way that results in personal growth. The next one, number 4, is I for impact. Most days I see positive results because of my work. And C is connection. Number 5, I feel like I belong here. And then the last questions are open-ended, fill in the blank kind of questions. And I wouldn't ever ask more than 2. And the first one is, what are the greatest strengths of our organization? And then conversely, what are the areas that need the most improvement within our organization? All right, so now what? I want you to make sure these are the takeaways, things that putting everyone in the right seat on the right bus. You want to create a safe and comfortable environment for all your staff and volunteers. I want you to get to know your staff. Let go of any negativity you may have about them. We may not really like everybody we work with, but we need to respect everybody. So let go of any of the negative. You also want to give them the knowledge, the training, the tools, all the information that they need to do their job well. You want to make sure that they have training. It goes back to the last one. Ask them how you're doing in their eyes. What might they need from you? What are things that you can do? You want their feedback on how you're doing. I think that's a very vulnerable place to go with your staff, but it can be very powerful. And of course, check in often, communicate with your staff and volunteers. It's really important. Rotate the dredge work. So what I mean is if there's a yucky part of the job, don't just give it to one person. Do it yourself. If somebody has to take out the garbage or, rinse out the toilets, make sure everybody does it, not just one person. And in all areas, as much as possible, discuss engagement, communicate with your employees and volunteers. You want to empower your top performers to do a great job and reward and recognize all of your employees in some way, shape, or form. We all like to know that we're doing the right thing in our jobs and doing it well. And most importantly, be consistent and keep your promises. That's really important. Don't promise something that you can't deliver. All right, so in the back here in your appendix, there are some definitions of engagement that might help. We didn't go through these just for time. There are some additional engagement questions that you could ask. And I would start slowly if you're going to ask your staff some of these questions. Start with one and send it to them privately, and then talk about the results and then put together a plan. It's really important that once you get the information that you put a plan together in order to change things. So there's a couple different sets here. They're all good. One set isn't better than the other. They're just looking at different areas of work. This set is on professional growth. And then the impact of it all at work. And this is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs at work, in the workplace. Just a model of employee engagement. All right, questions and answers. Here's our contact information. You all across the world have access to HR services. There is an 800 phone number. I'm not sure how that works, but you can always call us if you're based in the United States. We take emails, hrservices@501c.com, and we look forward to working more with you all. Thank you, and I brushed through that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sonya.
Thank you, Sonya. We appreciate it. Sonya, do you want to do me a favor? Can you unshare your screen?
Absolutely.
Terrific. Thank you. And thank you guys, everyone who's participated on the call and you were actively engaged. You were present, fully present for this employee engagement session. And so thank you so much for your feedback. So Dawn, do we want to tell them a few next steps in terms of the evaluation and anything that's coming up from a WFYC perspective?
Sure, real quick. Thank you. It was wonderful how engaged everybody was in that session. Thank you so much for participating in the chat and the discussion. We just wanted to let you know a couple things. So you'll get an email from me with the slides that Sonya mentioned, right? So you can have the things that were in the appendix and have all that information available for you. We'll also upload this session to YouTube so that you can share it with others on your team, or if you wanted to watch it again to get a certain part, you're welcome to do so. There'll be a quick survey that's about 4 or 5 questions, just so that we can continue to enhance these sessions and do subjects that you're interested in. And then just a couple of other notes is that November 18th is the next session. It's on revenue generation and fundraising. So it's how to think like a chief revenue officer. So I'll send you that information as well if you'd like to attend that webcast session. And just a note that we did announce the dates of our 2022 International Conference, which is March 1st through 3rd. So you'll be getting more information about that. But that's what's ahead. We're excited to see what 2022 will bring. And we just thank you, Sonya, so much for being with us today, and for all of you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I love seeing people's comments.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you, Sonya, and thank you, Dawn, for all of that additional information. And thank you, everyone, for your participation in today's webcast. And a reminder that this session will be posted on the WFYC, the World Federation of Youth Clubs website. Okay, so just go to the website and you'll be able to access the recording of today's session. So thank you all, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.